was officially included in a document for achieving 5 strategic European goals by 2020. That was employment, innovation, instruction, decreasing poverty, and climate changes. So if we want to take things simple and not so technical, in my humble opinion, if I want to explain the word smart city to someone, it's basically utilizing a city's resources and infrastructure to their maximum capacity in the best optimized way. And by saying optimized way, I mean that cities nowadays, they have the cellular networks available for 4G. Now cities even have 5G. So how IoT can help official authorities to make the most out of it? If we take as an example the public transportation, IoT can help with removing the obstacle of low network coverage in the remote locations in order to track using the IoT-enabled devices the tracks and make optimized routes for the buses or any other public transportation vehicle. Another example is the one of public parking spots. Parking, as you know, is one of the most expensive resources in almost any major city in the world. I'm sure if we take as an example Valletta, I'm sure you all experience how inconvenient parking is in Valletta. To mitigate this major problem, city authorities have frequently the need to close streets, reroute traffic, and notify the public about roadworks. So IoT-enabled technologies can really solve the problem here. In the case of public transportation, we can talk about road sensors, tracking devices on buses, bicycles, so you can have data generated in real time, collected, aggregated, and analyzed through IoT platforms. These are the two main cases for IoT. And, not speaking about large cities like Washington or London, if we take examples of Valletta or in Cyprus, Limassol or Nicosia, IoT can be real effective.
And of course, you mentioned parking and traveling there in Valletta. I think if you have a solution for that, everyone is going to be extremely excited and very, very grateful. So let's move on, because you also mentioned some large cities back there, but referencing Valletta specifically as a small city in Europe. Are there any more examples, apart from parking and traveling, are there any more examples of how you can improve citizens and tourists' experience of the city? Because this is so important.
Yes. So if we take as an example the bike sharing. Bike sharing is a trend nowadays. Valletta is a popular tourist destination, which makes bike sharing an ideal transportation method. Even though it's not popular among the locals, it's something that foreigners and tourists like to use. Bicycles in general possess a high market value for many reasons, like the flexibility, convenience, energy efficiency, and environmental friendliness. So when we talk about a bike sharing system, we are basically talking about a service that enables people to get access to bikes, usually for short-term period, and the bike rental companies or that might be a municipality office or a private company be able to manage and track those bicycles in real time. The bike sharing system, there are many papers about it. It actually emerged as a critical component of urban transportation policies, mainly in the last decade, due to the recent surge in the number of bicycles in the world's large cities. So now Smaller cities are trying to adopt this model to accommodate with the demand and be environmental friendly. I don't know if you want to get not so technical, but maybe I can provide, let's say, in an abstract logic way, how a tourist who lands in Malta can do the full cycle from searching for a bike until giving it back for availability, how IoT can help for this use case.
Stefano, if you have a less technical explanation, I would love to hear it, because I think it's very, very relevant for everybody.
So a user will install a certain application on their iOS or Android mobile. They will scan a tag that is present on the bicycle. So the bicycle will then be unlocked. Of course, if there are any fees to be paid and the user has sufficient credits on their application, the money will be deducted from the application. Once the user commences his or her trip, there is a timer that is activated on the mobile's application, and that indicates the timer and guides the user to the desired destination. Of course, if they prepay for 1 hour, they are able to track how much time they are using it, but also with the data that is sent to the centralized IoT platform using, I wouldn't say big data, but based on historical data, the bike sharing companies and the ones who control it can actually create patterns and get estimations about the, let's say, estimated real location of the certain bike back to the public. So this expedites the whole, let's say, logistics system, makes all the available bikes in real time available to those interested, and in generally there is a much more optimized use of this system, because as I said, when we speak about smart cities, it's not about robots taking over, it's about making in full and in an optimized way the best of the infrastructure in place.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, Stefano, before I pass across to Daryl, and Daryl's going to give us some more case studies in just a moment, I do have a question for you that's come in. Can you please elaborate further on IoT solving the data access in remote locations? Can you elaborate further this? How can IoT technology complement ticketing and or tracking technology in this regard?
Yes, so I will try not to go very technical, but I have to, because it's a, it's a tech summit, so allow me to go. So if we take as an example the LoRa and the LoRaWAN, these are networking protocols that help connecting battery-powered devices to either a regional network or a public internet network. So cities can deploy sensors throughout urban areas, enabling those devices and the those devices and the routers or the GPS devices to be interconnected without the need of cellular network. So if we are talking about the main cities, these, if we assume that they are covered fine with 4G or 5G, there is no problem. But what IoT can really solve is to make the life of everyone in an island or a country easier. So the LP1, the LP1 stands for Low Power Wide Area Network, helps, I would say, substitute the need of cellular network to connect those devices.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Stefano and Graham, thank you for your contributions so far. I will have more questions for you. Stay right where you are. But so thank you so much for that. I would like to now ask Daryl from AIS if you could share with us some more case studies, some use cases for smart cities, for IoT. So I can put this in context. What are the case uses that we might be familiar with?
Yep, thank you very much. So yeah, the beauty of IoT is that you can get, great use cases across so many different verticals. So some of the use cases that we have worked on and we have seen great value in when deployed in a smart city environment is in smart waste, smart environmental monitoring, and even, as Stefano mentioned, smart parking solutions. So in a smart waste management system, if we have to take that as the first example, would leverage the low power wide area network that Stefano mentioned. We deploy their battery powered wireless sensors. We place them inside waste bins across a smart city or an island if we have to apply it to Malta. The advantage that we get from a smart waste solution is that we can get insights and real-time data directly from source. So that allows us to create an optimized waste collection route, for example, and then use artificial intelligence techniques to really make sure that the system and the waste collection is efficient as it can be. Another example is smart environmental monitoring, whereby again we use low power wide area networks to deploy sensors in a smart city. So sensors can be sensors reading temperature, for example, relative humidity, but even air quality and carbon monoxide. So these type of sensors send data to a cloud platform, and we can make that data available to municipalities, for example, government officials, local users, and the public citizens in general, and they can see trends, generate insights, and view their data wherever they may be. Stefano mentioned their smart parking in the context of a public environment. There's also the private environment. So normally if you go to a shopping mall or you go to a congested area, you get private car parks, for example. You can deploy these type of technologies even within these type of buildings, these type of facilities. The main benefit there is to improve the experience of the citizen, improve the experience of your customer and your business users, and that is where the main advantage that smart cities bring, and where the use cases really leave an impact on the people who are using this type of technology.
You mentioned there, and we've discussed parking, we've discussed waste management, which is fantastic. We've discussed also
waste collection system. So we have seen that waste collection trips have been reduced by 20% in the deployments that we have worked with, and these have led to a reduction in tons and thousands of tons of CO2 emissions on an annual basis. So this is leading to an environment and a quality of life for all citizens, which is safer, healthier, and ultimately leading to a greater quality of life for everyone. So these are some of the examples there where IoT can play a part in optimizing the resources available within a city.
But what also about making cities safer? Is there an implementation that would make a city like Valletta or any city? I mean, Malta, we have almost a city environment across the whole country. Is there anything that we can identify that would make a city safer for us that is implemented by IoT?
Yeah, so you can have there in those situations, we know that Valletta is congested even in terms of traffic. So you can handle that by having systems there in place which are seeing, analyzing, for example, image data in real time, linking them together with traffic systems, for example, when pedestrian is crossing, for example, to automatically change the signaling lights, for example. So you have these possibilities and you have these examples and they are all doable with IoT.
This is fantastic. Pedestrian crossing safer is something I would be very, very happy to see. It would be absolutely amazing. Well, listen, before we come to the wonderful Michael, last but definitely not least, I just want to open that up to everybody here on the panel. If there are any situations that we haven't, if there are any scenarios and problems that are solved by IoT in smart cities that we haven't mentioned yet, is there anything that we're missing? Great, Graham, fire away.
It's Graham from London here. Just out of interest, we have a pretty useful use case that you might want to know about, and that is we had a problem in Barcelona where we put a major smart city environment already, where there was a sudden spike in respiratory diseases, and it was not known why this happened. And using the IoT platform, we were able to correlate two things: an onshore wind and delivery of open soya in ships. And then it was being decanted in the port area. Now that's of interest to Malta because Malta has a port area as well. And what they actually found was that when the soya was decanted in that way in the port area with an onshore wind, there was a spike in healthcare calls for poor respiratory response and an uptick in requirement for inhalers for people who suffered that response. And that was all really root cause analysis was done using IoT data. Wouldn't have happened otherwise. It would have been written off as a crazy conspiracy theory, couldn't possibly be connected, but what about this? Maybe, maybe not. But it was absolutely nailed to the floor on the basis of IoT information. That, I think, is a very good example.
I think it's a brilliant example. And it's interesting because I was about to ask you, Graham, I was going to say, well, would not we understand that and implement a solution to that problem anyway? But what you're actually saying is, no, without IoT, that would never have been verified.
Wouldn't have automatically made a cast iron correlation between a healthcare case and an arrival of a certain cargo in a certain way and cross-correlated it with the wind conditions. It was only IoT with multiple sensors from different sources that made that story work.
That's absolutely incredible. Before I come to a question that we've just received for Daryl, gentlemen, is there anybody else who has a problem that is solved by IoT that we haven't mentioned yet, just like Graham's just mentioned now? I'm going to grill you in just a few minutes. Michael, I'm coming to you in a second, but before we get there, another question there for Daryl has come in. What are the main drivers you see for implementation of smart city solutions? Regulatory, financial, environment, or something else?
Ultimately, it depends on the particular use case, but I would say economic is now starting to play an increasing part, in the sense that if you had to take as an example a smart parking solution in a public area, in a municipality or in an area like Valletta or Slima, it's come to the point now where citizens and clients and so on are making decisions on where they go to shop or where they go for entertainment or stuff like that, based on how easy it is to get there, what their overall experience is going to be. And that is where IoT can play a role in the background too, because if you're offering a parking, making it easier to park, making it a cleaner environment for everyone, that would encourage people to go to that place, and therefore you're increasing business in that area, you're generating income, you're making it more attractive to tourists, to people to live there, and to businesses to operate. So ultimately, the fundamental driver, as we know, is it needs to make sense from an economic point of view, and that's where the biggest driver comes in for IoT technology, in my opinion.
Daryl, that's a perfect example, because I so often will not go shopping because I don't know where I'm going to park, and I don't want to be going around in Slima over and over again trying to find somewhere. So if IoT can fix that for me, just there. Michael, I'm coming to you. Thank you so much for being patient there. Michael's joined us from EY. My question for you, my first question, sort of ties in with that and follows on from what Graham just said there. How should central and local governments identify the use case scenarios for smart city adoption? Graham just mentioned Bucharest having its own issues, but how should that be seen in general?
Yeah, absolutely. This brings all the elements that that the colleagues on the panel here mentioned. First of all, it's experience, and secondly is resource utilization. So there needs to be a process in terms of understanding the holistic benefits that one wants to achieve for the city. Understanding who are the stakeholders. Is it the businesses? Is it the citizens? Is it the delivery people? Is it those who are actually driving the buses? So one needs to look at a holistic view in terms of who are the stakeholders that will be impacted by this. Understanding their behaviors, their expectations, their frustrations, and bringing it together, through focus groups, through research, through other methods, in order to come up with not a solution in terms of how I'm going to plug in this sensor somewhere, but what is the benefit that I'm actually going to get to the stakeholders of that city or the island or a region. So there might be multiple levels at which one sees this. You can look at a small town, at a particular business district, at a particular industrial area. Involve the stakeholders, understand where the frustrations are, what's impacting them, and then utilize that in order to identify the hypothetical potential use cases based on best practices, what other countries have actually done, what other cities have actually done, what has worked, what didn't work, and identify the priority use cases that needs to be put in place in order to address the concerns of those stakeholders. That will drive what kind of data is required, what kind of sensors are required. And most importantly, we need to think of this as not just one single party participating in, deploying sensors for the garbage collection or having cameras for the traffic. We need to look at it as a complete ecosystem of various players that all have data to contribute and benefits to gain. It doesn't need to be one single entity that is actually deploying all the sensory aspect and the technology aspect and driving the use cases. It needs to actually have a participatory factor of all the players. If it's businesses, if it's people who are doing the delivery, if it's the public transportation system providers, if it's the utility providers, cleaning and maintenance of the city or the town, and bringing that together. And all of these have contribution elements to bring to the whole ecosystem of the smart city or smart town or smart island, and all of them have benefits. And so from an institution point of view, apart from the policy and the regulation aspects, there is the potential for local councils, local government, regional government, etc., to become brokers for this ecosystem to happen, connecting the dots and bringing it all together.
But we are talking, therefore, about a tailored solution, not a plug and play, not out of the box, not one size fits all. We're talking about looking at each individual scenario and fitting into that scenario what is right for that city. Exactly as Graham and, in actual fact, Stefano and Daryl have mentioned already, that different cities have different requirements. Different cities need different solutions.
Yeah, exactly. You have different patterns. You have different stakeholders in different areas. If you go to a small town, you have, and it's more residential, small businesses, schools. Of course, there are certain common core services that are being provided, ambulance service, fire service, safety, protection, and all that stuff, cleaning. They're most of the time common elements, but each area has a different demographic, which have different behaviors and different stakeholders. And that needs to be brought to actually develop a strategy specific to that particular area. What kind of benefits? You wouldn't go to, to come up with a smart city plan and use cases, that focus on tourism if you're looking at an area like Marsa or Bulebel, which are industrial and commercial. You would rather do that in a Valletta or in a Slim or in a Rabat and Lublina area. So one needs to.
And how does that differ between perhaps Bucharest, Barcelona, London and Valletta? How does that work out, Michael?
I wouldn't say that it would differ much. When it comes to the technology, then it's going to be a matter of scale, right? So scale will definitely drive different scenarios, and from a technology point of view. Definitely, there are three fundamental elements, and they've been touched on by the other panelists. First is data. Data is what drives the smart city. And everything that is actually going to be following that data element is all for the sake of providing data. Data is actually driving, understanding what the behaviors are, what the pattern, trying to get the information in order to be able to identify the patterns, get the defects, as Graham mentioned, make sure we decisions are taken, either if it's from an automation point of view or from a policy point of view. Data is going to drive that. Second is obviously sensors. And when we look at sensors, there's different forms of sensors. It could be the people's phone, it could be the cameras, it could be sensor that attached to the water system, electricity, road signals, sensors in the entirety in order to be able to actually gather that data. And the third component is integration, because as we mentioned, it's not just getting the sensor of the climate environment, but getting the information from the shipping or from the traffic system or from the bus routes or from the delivery vehicles and bringing it all together as one single view, or what we refer to as a data lake, in order to be able to start building those correlations and the analysis that then can drive policy or automation. So, and obviously there's different tools that come into play in order to do that. Data science is a very important element of that. AI is a very important element of that. But, all this together, it's a plethora of technologies that come into play in order to actually build out and realize that smart system. And again, I think we need to think about smart cities as systems, right? We need to think of them as they have these various dimensions, various components, various sources, and we need to actually architect them and design them in order to be able to support the initial hypothesis of the use cases that drove for the motivation in order to make that deployment, that investment, but as continuous learning systems, because those initial use cases and those assumptions, there's going to be new scenarios that will be discovered from the data. The behavioral patterns of the stakeholders within the city are going to evolve, and hence the whole system needs to be constantly refined and improved.
Will you just mention there about information coming in and updating and having real-time information from this data that's being acquired and drawn? But doesn't that mean that smart city deployments will require continuous improvement? And if that's the case, what's the implication of that? Is there a commercial or even a financial implication of using the data, yes, to bring the very best system and to bring the very best solution, but surely that's also going to present its own issues?
You have to have people who are looking at the data, people who are actually analyzing it, and people who are actually constantly refining the system. You cannot, by making cities smart, you're doing two things. One is you're collecting information from multiple sources in order to understand the behaviors. And two, you're making decisions either in real time or from a policy point of view that is changing certain elements that are dynamic within that city that will eventually change the behavior. So it's like any system, if you're making changes, let's give an example, right? If I am integrating traffic information with information from where roadworks are actually happening, and I've been facing a lot in the area where I live over the past couple of years. So the roadworks are going on. Roadworks are evolving from one different section to another. The whole system around buses, traffic diversions or traffic routes, the whole system about delivery services, cleaning and garbage collection, etc., is being affected by something which is actually changing. Now, if that information is flowing back in and I'm making traffic diversions in order to be able to obviously allow the people that need to do the works to go on, that is actually going to change the behavior of the town or the city where you actually are deploying this. So there is a constant improvement and a constant analysis that needs to be done. And this is nothing different from what, when we work with businesses and they're employing data lakes and data and analytics technology and automation technology in their operational systems as companies, it's the same thing, but on a larger scale, where it's not a company, but it's a town, and you have different.
This kind of follows on from something that you said, Daryl, earlier on.
Yes, you can do that. First of all, you have to start with having data which is collecting information which is relevant to that particular use case. So you mentioned there being able to predict or detect crimes before they happen. If you have the data of where a crime has taken place, if you have time information and you can get other related information tied to that, then you can use tools in artificial intelligence and in machine learning to be able to predict what is the likelihood or what is the probability that this is going to happen again in this area, in this time window, in this season, or in this location. So those technologies exist and they can be applied. Obviously, you have to treat them with a level of caution and be aware of what you're dealing with there in order to be careful not to discriminate in any way a particular area or a particular individual. But yes, those technologies exist, and yes, through cloud technologies and artificial intelligence and machine learning, you can build models which allow you to get better insights and better predictions, and that will govern maybe then where resources in terms of policing and public security are different, so that they can be applied in areas which actually need them more than others.
Thank you, Daryl. Did anybody else have anything to add to that? Go, Graham, fill us in. Graham, we're not hearing you right this second. I don't know if you're muted, but we want to hear what you have to say.
Someone muted me. They'd had enough of Daryl. Anyway, okay. So what we've done with the European Crime Journal, the City of Stockholm, was interesting, because we did a repeat crime analysis that used and actually leveraged what's called a predictive algorithm, Now, intelligence-led policing is looking at what happened before and then trying to guess what's going to happen next and then going there in case it does. But predictive algorithms are really a mathematical development of that allows people to say, you know, we have a repeat victimization, crimes against the person hotspot in an area, and we can control that with street lighting and other IoT technologies. And that actually is a well-proven case. It's written up in a peer-reviewed journal called the European Crime Journal, which we contributed to and I peer-reviewed. So there are examples of actually having done that. And similarly, we've done crimes against the person and suicide and homicide work with transport police systems, because transport police have a very unfortunate use case, but it's very important, where people are either pushed or fall in front of metro and underground trains. And so the use of a predictive analytic in that environment is a proven lifesaver. And I mean, unfortunately, you end up with a number of lives saved per month. And that's a creepy statistic, but those things do exist. So yes, it's not all PowerPoint and flashing lights, I have to tell you. But if it's time saved and benefits delivered, then frankly, it should be in flashing lights somewhere, in my opinion.
Yes, obviously. I mean, that's a fantastic implementation of IoT. If it's saving lives and it's making a difference, I think everybody would support that. Thank you, gentlemen, for answering that question. Chaps, I have one last question for you. I don't know who's going to be able to answer this because this also sounds very, very sci-fi to me. But the question is, around 6,000 people in Sweden have so far had a microchip inserted into their hands. The citizens that had these microchips implanted stopped having to carry a vaccine passport, keys, an ID card, or even train tickets with them. Does this make the human body classify as an IoT device as well? Is this actually happening? Is this true? Is this Netflix coming to life?
Well, if I may, for those of us who wear smartwatches or carry a phone with us, it's already happening. It's maybe not implanted in our body, but it's actually we're getting data from the body into the smartwatch. Heart rate, stress level, number of steps walked, and there's more that could be done, and slowly it's actually happening. Like the human body is definitely can provide a lot of data, and where the fundamental reason of health, smartwatches and smart health devices are becoming part of that ecosystem. Now, obviously, it will privacy is definitely going to be a critical factor. Definitely there are some very contentious scenarios in terms of can health insurance provider drive policy around being accepted into the insurance if you do not walk 10,000 steps a day. Or if your heart rate is not regular. There are a lot of debates in the industry in terms of sensory devices that are more intrusive on the personal life and how that could impact certain commercial and policy behavior. And obviously, legislation and policy in that space is constantly evolving. My family, we live in a smart home. I have something like 100, smart devices.
Fire away, Stefano.
So as a closing statement, and if we, let's say, put aside the sci-fi use cases that we've mentioned right now and all the creepy stuff, and if we actually, which are, they are happening. But if we, let's say, take the IoT as a sphere and as Internet of Things that can really improve our lives, and aside the data privacy and the legislation, matters, what I believe is one of the main barriers which don't allow the transformation of IoT from a white paper to practice is the political landscape. I think Graham mentioned this in the beginning of our talk, that governments change every 4 to 5 years, so it's really difficult to make to start something and make a change quickly. So this is let's say my thought that the government sector or the political landscape needs to change. We are all aware of the climate changes, the impact of pollution to the environment, and everything where IoT can be helpful. So I believe if the governments and public authorities start working with the private sector, with industry experts, I believe that will be the best use case of all times to do great things.
Stefano, what a great statement to finish off. And I just want to say thank you so much to Graham, Stefano, Daryl and Michael there. It's been a really lively, interesting, slightly creepy, as you said just then, Stefano, at times, but an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being part of that panel discussion. And thank you for everything that you inputted into that. It's been very exciting. Now it's time for us to take a networking break. We encourage you to visit the exhibit hall and network with all of our exhibitors. We're going to be back very soon. We're taking a short lunch break. We're going to be back at 2:10. See you then.
you.